Part of President Trump's extensive New York Times interview we were telling you about a moment ago focuses on why the president believes he will win a second term in the Oval Office. And he says the media, which he often criticizes, will play a big role in making it happen. The president saying, quote, "But another reason that I'm going to win another 4 years is because newspapers, television, all forms of media will tank if I'm not there. Because without me, their ratings are going down the tubes." Tammy Bruce is a radio talk show host and Fox News contributor. Emily Shire, a journalist whose work has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Daily Beast as well. Emily, let's start with you. What do you think? Would ratings tank if we don't reelect Donald Trump?
I think the big problem with this sentiment is that it goes completely against the narrative that Trump has been pushing throughout even his presidential campaign, that the media is out to get him, that the media is actively thwarting his success. And you can't logically square this idea that the media needs him and that the media wants him to actually be reelected while constantly making it his favorite punching bag and blaming it for his political failings.
Tammy, what do you think about what the president had to say?
Well, look, he's the world's best troll, right? I love it. When I saw what he said, I laughed out loud, right? But let me just suggest that, yes, in 2016, the media was out to get him, and we were assessing the nature of the impact the media would have. And clearly what we're finding out is that they're not having any impact on him, that he, in fact, is loving this job. He's committed to it, and he's realizing the fact that he's been able to get his message out beyond them and above their heads. So this is really the ultimate trolling in telling liberals that the media, in their obsession with him, are only hurting themselves. They are actually helping him by exposing themselves and their bias. So he's accomplishing things on a few fronts, in addition to reminding the American people that the American media is not what it used to be. They used to control the narrative. They used to control what we thought was reality, and those days are over. So I think it's pretty funny, and he's doing a great job with it.
The choice of the venue here is interesting, Emily, because, you know, there's probably no media outlet that the president has criticized more than the New York Times, calls it fake news and so forth. And yet he gives them this big, wide-ranging end-of-the-year interview. Why the Times?
Yeah, that's a curious question, and I think that's why the interview took so many people by surprise. But to the point that Tammy was making, I think it presupposes that Donald Trump has had a successful year to say that he's being a successful troll with the media. The fact is his popularity numbers are tanking, and even with House of Representatives and Senate on his side, he really struggled to get even basic legislation pushed through. And so perhaps he's reaching out to the New York Times at the end of the year to suggest that he has been more successful than he is, that he has had more success with the media than he has, and that it hasn't had an impact on him. But it's clear that even with the House and the Senate on his side, he's really struggled to get anything done this year.
Well, and speaking of fake news, let's talk about this. In a blog, the Facebook organization says that by showing related articles rather than disputed flags, we can help give people better context and understand how people decide what's false and what is not will be crucial to our success over time. This is because Facebook was trying to flag articles that they deemed to be fake news, Tammy, and all of a sudden people were clicking on the things like mad.
Yeah, see, this is what's interesting about that idea, that Facebook thought that we were all waiting for mommy to tell us what we should read and what we shouldn't, and what we were allowed to do. And we ended up made us more curious, of course, about what they were saying was fake. But the answer to what you might think is bad news or bad information is more. More information, more context, more speech. So it's interesting that Facebook finally got to that point, that individuals are going to make up their own mind, that we understand the nature of what's going on. We realize we're not going to get perfect information, and that some people, God forbid, may lie to us, like politicians and journalists. And we know these things. So this has always been the answer. When there's attempts to censor, of course, as civil libertarians like myself argue that the answer is not to stop or not to segregate, but it's to bring out more information and to have more of a conversation. And even when it comes to the president, as an example, just as a touchback to that last segment, the fact is that his approval ratings yesterday match the Barack Obama approval ratings, despite efforts by media to control the nature of what Americans think is happening. So we're able to now discern what works and what doesn't, and I'm glad Facebook finally realized that.
But it's not just politicians who are known to issue lies, Emily. The Russian government was sending out some propaganda during this last election.
Yeah, I mean, the Facebook issue is very complicated. I completely agree with Tammy that it's very difficult, and we don't want Facebook in the position of policing legitimate media sources. The problem is that Facebook admitted that 150 million Americans were exposed to content generated by Russian propaganda sources. And the issue is when are Russian agents pretending to be Americans, disguising themselves and exploiting our media sources to spread false information. That's what Facebook needs to grapple with. We don't want Facebook policing people's political opinions or conservative editorial commentaries. That's not the problem at hand. It's how do we deal when Russia and other foreign agents are infiltrating the system? And that's a very serious issue. And I think it's a problem that Facebook and Twitter and Google is going to be dealing with for many years to come.
A fellow named Barack Obama made news this week, 15 minutes of fame, Tammy, when he sat down with Britain's Prince Harry for a radio interview in which he seemed to criticize his successor. What did you make of that?
Well, look, I like the royal family. I'm a big fan of theirs. I like them better when they don't talk about politics, right? And the British don't want them to talk about politics either. And I think I want Harry and his soon-to-be new wife to be very happy. But she's an American liberal who doesn't like the president. And it's disappointing that Harry is moving into this kind of framework. But it's not surprising for Barack Obama, who's effectively downsized into a political gadfly. And he wants to be relevant. As Barack Obama is having fun talking to Prince Harry, President Trump is changing the world. So we have to look at these things perhaps maybe more as an entertainment framework. The ex-president, Barack Obama, always liked television and being on it and having some fun in that regard. And so perhaps this is a way of attempting to feel relevant. But I think that we've got our own dynamic here that's much more interesting and much more relevant.
Well, and they are friends, Emily. I mean, talk about dealing with a friendly reporter. Prince Harry and Barack Obama are buddies.
I don't know if they're best friends, but I certainly would not have expected Prince Harry to deliver a particularly hard-hitting interview with President Obama. I thought it was interesting that he danced around politics. He didn't name-call Trump, which seemed to echo his wife's approach when she was campaigning for Hillary Clinton. I don't think she actually ever, in fact, called out President Trump. That's been their style since Donald Trump's been running. And he just seemed to continue it during his interview with Harry. I would certainly expect it to be a softball interview. It was a softball interview.
All right. Emily Shire, Tammy Bruce, thank you both. We'll have you back for our next media panel. Thanks.